Welcome to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health, and the health of our planet. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter, and of course, I'm with Dr. Susanna as well today.
Hello. And today we are going to simplify healthy eating.
It's a huge task, but someone's got to do it. I mean, things are really complex and confusing out there, right? Who's with me? If you're listening, if you hear this and you agree that eating and nutrition, the whole world of food and nutrition is a little complex and confusing, give me a thumbs up or let us know that you can hear us okay?
Yes, because there are so many ways to eat out there according to all the different diet experts. And what we want to focus on today is what most of these diet experts and doctors actually agree upon. And at the end, we are going to kind of add our own opinion on what healthy eating also includes.
Right. I think before we start, I think the intention is to really, like Dr. Susanna said, to just demonstrate that, in fact, we do generally agree upon probably 95 to 99% of the information when it comes to food and eating. So we're going to focus on that, and it's kind of the common sense, and then we'll add our 2 cents in. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so our first point is eat whole foods. And you've probably heard this before. And so you think, okay, yes, I'm going to stop eating the cookies and the pastries and the cereals. And we actually like to take it to the very next level. So we think of things often like olive oil and coconut oil and hemp protein as a whole food because it's still just the olives, right?
Right. It's like, olive oil. Like, that's the same thing, right? A lot of us are led to believe that that's the case.
But actually, to make olive oil or coconut oil, it's still, the olives and the coconuts are going through, they're being processed. They're basically being pressed, and a lot of the nutrients get lost in that process. And you get a very concentrated, high-fat result, which is great for cooking. However, it's just really lacking.
Is it great for cooking?
Well, it doesn't have to be great for cooking.
I caught her. I caught Dr. Susanna.
Yeah. Because we actually don't cook with oil.
No.
But theoretically, they're good for cooking.
Yes. In theory they could be. But yeah, when you take an olives are rich in all sorts of nutrients. And when you press the oil out, you lose most of those nutrients, most of the fiber, of course, and you're left with 100% fat, which if you're doing the keto thing, if you're drinking that Kool-Aid, then that might be, the way to go, olive oil. But not necessarily, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then some other examples are like date sugar or coconut sugar. Again, like isolated form of the carbohydrates, but lacking the nutrients. And then also, like we said, hemp protein or brown rice protein or pea protein. You're just getting the protein and throwing the rest of the whole food out to create some other isolated form of the food. And really, we like to focus on eating foods in their whole form because there's this beautiful, I think of it as it's just the way nature intended us to eat the foods.
Absolutely. Who in the Paleolithic times was like throwing protein powder into anything, Exactly. So yeah, we are whole food, we are fueled by whole foods, and that is undoubtedly the most optimal fuel for us, whole foods. Not necessarily the store, although they do have a lot of whole foods in Whole Foods if you shop the perimeter of the store.
Yes.
So
number 2.
The next thing that is important when it comes to fueling yourself is being familiar with the nutrition labels, which are on all packages. But in my opinion, especially, I don't know if you agree with me, Dr. Susanna, but I do my best actually to avoid reading nutrition labels because I try to pick things that don't have labels.
Exactly.
When you go to the store and you get an apple, it doesn't have a nutrition label, right? You know it's an apple. Maybe some produce you're unfamiliar with, maybe it should have a label so that you can think, oh my gosh, is that a rutabaga or a kohlrabi? But so maybe some fruits and vegetables should have labels. But nonetheless, when it comes to eating foods out of a package, which we can from time to time, let's face it, some things are tasty and some things add an element of fun and stuff to our life.
And sometimes it's about convenience too.
And convenience.
Buying pre-made salsa versus making your own or something.
I forgot that not everybody is blessed with a Susanna in the kitchen who's making everything all the time. So I like to make stuff too, but we're going to get into cooking and food preparation. But where was I? The nutrition labels. Mm-hmm. So if you are reading a label, I want to talk about what you should look at, because there's a lot of things on the label. There's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of words. And really I actually don't look at many numbers at all. I look at the words, and specifically the words that I look at are the ingredients. I want to know what is in that package. I don't want to know how much of what macronutrient or mineral. I just want to know what's in there. And if it's just common sense. If I can recognize those things as foods, then I feel a little bit more comfortable eating it. Unless, of course, I have some sort of particular intolerance personally to some food or another. But I want to at least be able to recognize that the stuff in my food is food derived, right? Mm-hmm. That alone, I think, will get people very far, focusing on eating food and not chemicals and not artificial sweeteners and not food coloring, eating food. So that's really the only thing I look at the nutrition label is the ingredients.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Next.
All right, moving on to number 3, eat organic.
Yeah.
And this is one, you just gotta do it.
I know. And sometimes it's actually like impossible. You might be in a food desert. Mm-hmm. And so what do you do if you're in a food desert, Dr. Susanna?
Well, if you're in a food desert and if you're on a tight budget, because let's face it, eating organically is expensive, look at the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen is a list that the Environmental Working Group put together that has all the top 12 foods that are just heavily laden in pesticides and herbicides and all sorts of chemicals that you don't want in your body that can disrupt your reproductive system and your neurological system and your whole body. And the Clean 15 are the top 15 foods that have the least amount, hopefully no pesticide residues found on them when they're grown conventionally. And so these ones are typically safe, and go for it. Even, we'll buy some conventional avocados from time to time, and that's really a great resource to find. But also just think about when if you're having this internal debate about how much to spend on food because organic produce is really expensive, think about, we like to say living healthfully is so expensive. But when we compare that with living a life of illness where you're spending money on pharmaceuticals and hospital bills, it's really actually not that expensive in the long run.
I mean, let's face it, you take your freaking car to the shop for an oil change every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, right? Like, you're spending money on your car's preventative care. So consider spending a few extra dollars, just budgeting for your personal care. And I'm not talking about personal care products and supplements. When I'm talking about personal care, I'm talking about the food, the organic food, the high quality fuel that you deserve. Mm-hmm.
You're investing in your health.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the biggest forms of self-love.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay, number 4.
Number 4. I guess I'm qualified enough to talk about this point, which is preparing your own food. I kind of alluded to this just a few minutes ago when I was talking about trying to avoid the necessity of reading nutrition labels. So if you're not reading labels, you're probably not going to be just chomping on carrots and apples and celery sticks all day. You're going to be throwing these things together to make what I like as being, just simple but nourishing meals. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a world-class kind of dish that you would order at a 5-star restaurant, right? You can be, focus on the simple pleasures of just like roasted vegetables or steamed vegetables. And, we love adding other sort of textures into our dishes, whether it's a special sauce, which really will transform any sort of meal, or spiralized cucumbers or other spiralized vegetables. That adds a really fun component. But really, it doesn't have to be anything super duper special. I would say that maybe once or twice a week, we'll do like more of a special meal in terms of maybe following more of a recipe, and might spend an hour in the kitchen. But that's the other point, is that you should be spending more time in the kitchen. You are worth that time. And for me, I don't inherently love spending time in the kitchen like Susanna does. So if if I were living alone, it would be like kind of another story. I would have to really find some internal motivation to put myself in the kitchen in a mindful and loving way each day. But if you do have a partner or a friend, a roommate, anyone, just consider spending that time in the kitchen as quality time. And the amazing, beautiful thing about spending time in the kitchen is that it's very synergistic, or it can be or should be. So 1 + 1 in the kitchen, you have a lot of hands that can do a lot of beautiful work to feed your mouths. So I think that's all I have to say. But I know that Susanna probably, like I said, she's got more of a inherent loving relationship to being in the kitchen. So what do you think?
Well, I think, another really big benefit to cooking your own food is exactly what is in the food.
Of course, yeah.
Not only what ingredients are in the food, but what kind of energy is being put into the food.
Yeah, that's I've kind of forgot to say that, when you go to a restaurant and when you even get the the healthy option, the salad with the dressing, most of the time the salad dressing has, soybean oil or canola oil, or one of these processed oils that we're talking about, which a little bit is obviously totally okay, and we want to, ease up on ourselves as best we can. But, that's why eating out should be maybe once a week or a couple times a month. And if you're not eating out, where are you eating, right? So you're eating in your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And just to touch on some of the other ingredients that kind of sneak into restaurant food a lot, sugar is often added to salad dressings and sauces of all sorts. Highly inflammatory food, processed food. You get all the calories, but no nutrients. And then also salt is such a big one. And I know we this is the one we feel. When we eat out at a restaurant the next morning, I just feel like a little groggy and super thirsty, and my hands are a little bit puffy. And it's because it's so much more salt than we would ever put in our own food in the kitchen. And so yeah, it's just, good to be aware of those ingredients that you might be eating at restaurants. And we still eat out and enjoy it. We just, what we notice is that after we eat out the next night, at least I feel this way. Oh. I'm super excited to eat at home.
Susanna, we woke up, and one of the first things that you said, Susanna, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to eat at home tonight." Yeah, last night we had fun. We went out with some friends and had some, vegan pizza, but it was a little salty. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of vegetables. It was delicious.
It was as far
but
as
just a little
vegan
bit
pizza.
salty.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, which
Okay.
brings us to the fifth point, which I think, is kind of the bulk, the meat of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really not the meat, is it?
It's
Susanna?
not the meat.
No.
It's the plants.
The plants of the conversation.
Yes.
All right.
And so, yes, point number 5 is eat mostly plants.
Oh,
and
wait.
we have Michael Pollan to back us up on this one, right? With his food rules.
We've got pretty much every, well-known scientist that has ever been on this planet to back us up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's plenty of research and reason to choose plants whenever possible. And what that means doesn't mean going vegan.
Mm-hmm.
That I've found very clearly that phraseology kind of alarms people, and that's not what we are in any way suggesting, is to taking that sort of leap anytime that's not feeling comfortable for you, but really rather focusing on what's what's nutrient dense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Susanna, do you want to talk a little bit about nutrient density?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really our goal with every meal is basically to get in as many nutrients per calorie as possible.
That's our goal.
That's
Is it your goal? I'm curious. Is that what you're thinking about when you're eating? Like, how can I get these nutrients into my body? Because literally that's usually, at least, I mean, I'm also thinking, wow, this is delicious. But I'm also thinking, oh man, this feels good. This is making me feel good.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I know you feel that way, Susanna, but I don't know if that's a generally felt experience for others while they're eating. So if it's not something that you are connecting with, that feeling of, oh man, this feels good and I'm nourishing myself, then I would consider doing two things. One, just choose foods that evoke that feeling. And two, allow yourself to really acknowledge what you're doing and how it's influencing your whole body. So, do those things.
So how we do that, I don't think we haven't even just said it directly, but plants, fruits and vegetables are the most densely nutritious foods that we can consume. They're high in all the minerals and vitamins that the body needs. And so that's why we like to focus on eating a lot of vegetables or fruits with every meal. And you can still have your animal products, but maybe you're minimizing them. You're not having it be the main event of the meal. It's more of a side dish on the meal. Mm-hmm. And that way you're getting in all the fiber, all the nutrients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you consider that in a day, say that you are on a standard 2,000 to 2,500 calorie, diet, which I don't really believe in ever counting calories, but if you are, that's usually where people land, then each calorie is an opportunity to once again get those nutrients into your body. So when you have a big serving of meat or other animal products, the fact of the matter is that those are very calorically dense items on the plate they have some nutrients and nutritional value. But when you compare that serving of animal product with any comparable serving of a plant-based product, preferably in its whole food that we already focused on, then it doesn't matter what plant you're eating, whether it's a white potato or whether it's, kale chips, you are going to be getting so much more nutrition from those plants than that animal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And when we say eat more plants, we're not saying just eat a bunch of carrots and greens and rabbit food.
Mm-hmm.
we actually eat a lot of potatoes and a lot of sweet potatoes, and these are foods that have kind of been demonized, but I think really what's made them associated with ill health is not the potato itself. it's the oil that the potatoes usually fried in.
Which,
and this icky combination of high carbohydrates and high fats consumed at the same time.
Which brings us to the last point of this conversation about food. And hopefully you're feeling like, at this point, hopefully you're feeling, all right, like, I get it. I get it more than I've gotten it before. There's not much to it. But this last point is one that I would really like to drive home a little bit, because I think it is generally overlooked and maybe more at the root cause of a lot of health conditions that people face. Because we've just kind of vaguely talked about the plant-based and then the animal-based, right? Which really, when we're saying plant-based, we're saying carbohydrate-based, which I know that term has a lot of baggage with it these days. But carbohydrates are the fuel that plants provide the body, and they are the preferred fuel for the body. And animal-based eating or a fat-based, fat protein-based, eating, which there's, the plant-based fats, as we know, like, if you're eating a whole meal of coconuts or avocado or something, that would be more of a fat-based meal. But we like to focus on the carbohydrate-based meal, but it is okay to focus on the plant or the fat-based meal. But the thing is, you don't want to focus on the two of those at the same meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
no meat and potatoes.
Oh man, yeah, no meat and potatoes. No, bacon bits and sour cream on your potato. No, well, what are some other examples? French fries. I mean, gosh, donuts, French fries. Any pastry is loaded with fat. It's really not necessarily carbohydrates that are inherently poisonous, and it's not the fat. It's just the combination is the deadly combination, like literally.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why that is our bodies have kind of this metabolic priority. And as I said, we are carbohydrate-fueled organisms. And we are, unless we're, of course, fasting, or unless we're eating only fat, we're going to be burning carbohydrates. So if you have carbohydrates and fat during one meal, or a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of fat during one meal, then you're going to be burning those carbohydrates, and the fat is going to be left as fat,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to be, stored in the body.
Because once your body gets enough fuel from one meal, it's like, okay, that's good. I'm going to store the rest of this for later.
That's what we're programmed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have been under the impression that fat or that carbs is what makes you fat. And I'm not saying that fat makes you fat. What I'm saying is that the combination of carbohydrates and fats is what creates more of what I call this metabolic dilemma
mm-hmm.
for the body.
And more specifically, the combination of high carbohydrates and high fat in one meal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So eating an avocado on your salad is totally okay. Eating steak and potato is more questionable,
mm-hmm.
for sure. Eating steak alone, much better.
Or steak with a side of leafy greens.
Steak with leafy greens.
Low carbohydrate vegetables.
Exactly. That's when the whole paleo thing becomes more okay, from my perspective, is because you're not high fat and high carb. You're more high fat, high protein, generally lower carb, but you're getting the nutrients in the leafy greens and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that last point did not confuse everyone even more so. But I found that last point a really important piece to focus on when we're talking about food, is the idea of combining macronutrients, fats and carbs, and focusing on one or the other, but not doing the steak and potatoes, or at least, maybe on your birthday. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So any other points?
I think that's it. I mean, Ben and I can talk about this all day, but
man.
next week, do we know what we're talking about next week?
I think next week we're going to dive more into carbohydrates as a fuel source for the body, and
All right.
we'll get into the details a little bit. But yeah, this was a broad overview. Once again, we'll focus on we'll kind of do an overview, simplifying healthy eating, focusing on whole foods, olives over olive oils, over olive oil, avocados over avocado oil, dates over date sugar, that sort of thing.
Read the nutrition labels, not the calories, not the macronutrients, but focus on the ingredients and make sure that the ingredients on the nutrition label are whole foods that you recognize.
And focusing on organic. And of course, if you're limited to organic options or financially restricted and organic produce is more expensive, then referring to the environmental working groups, Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen.
Cook your own food.
Yeah.
And with loved ones.
Yeah, preferably with loved ones. Enjoy it. And eat mostly plants. Focus on the nutrient density as opposed to the caloric density. And then food combining, lastly. And, we didn't really touch on this at all, and I know we're kind of out of time, but make your eating experience one that's filled, in addition to the cooking experience, the food preparation experience, but make your feeding experience, your eating, make it fun and enjoyable, and at least take a breath, say a blessing of gratitude. If you have an opportunity to enjoy it with a loved one, do it.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite times of the day.
Yeah.
So
on that note,
all right, thanks for listening.
Peace and love. Thank you for listening, and until next time, bye for now.
Bye.